shit. You're here. You look so pretty.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, kiddos. This is your girl Joe back with another episode of Shit Under My Nails. It is the month of October. So guess what? It's Murder, Mystery, and Mayhem Month, where we sit up here and we get into the minds of many different criminals on the day-to-day basis. On each episode, we'll sit up here and talk about a new criminal, what they did, where they from, and what happened. Because we want to know. We want to still get that spooky, ooky feel. So I'm super duper excited. And we're coming back to back with these episodes. We are in season 4 and we're trying to keep it strong because of you guys. And I greatly appreciate it. Today's episode, we're going to talk about a young lady by the name of Giulia Tofani. Giulia Tofani. Giulia Tofani was deemed as the most prolific serial killer in history because Giulia was basically sought out to have killed 600 plus men in a span over 50 years. Now, let's get into Miss Giulia, honey. So, Giulia, she was born in the 1600s, and it was said that her mother passed away because her mother killed her husband, which was Giulia's dad, Francis, and she killed him by poison. Now, the reason why I'm making this a light of the story is because of the simple fact, Miss Giulia, she killed these 600 people by poison as well. There were rumored to be that Giulia's mother passed down this recipe of poison so that, she could continue the work. Basically, eventually, she got into the business. Now, back then, Giulia was a beautiful woman, which is kind of hard because we can't find any photos of her or paintings. Any paintings that were of her were destroyed because of, everything that happened. Basically, they said that Giulia was a beautiful woman, so back then she worked into the beauty industry. Now, a while back, it was said that because she worked in the beauty industry, she sold to a lot of different people, and she seen things that she didn't approve of. She didn't approve of a lot of different things for the woman. Women in the 17th century were auctioned off like objects to loveless and often abusive marriages, and these women basically they had no financial social power and they really only had 3 options at their disposal, which was to get married or to stay single and rely on a sex worker, or become a respectable and well-off widow. So you only had 3 options. Divorce was not one of them. Giulia felt like she had to take it into her own hands, and she started hanging around these apothecaries. Now, back then, apothecary was basically your local CVS people, except for they would physically mix up these potions and lotions to make you feel better. It was for the better health in you. She would also use these apothecaries to also help her create some of her beauty powders and things of that nature. Now, back then they were into some really weird shit because of the simple fact that they would use belladonna berry to basically dilate their pupils, because back then that was considered very attractive and luminous. And they would also use lead and arsenic to lighten the skin because it was more attractive back then. Now, and the reason why I'm highlighting these things is because I want you guys to know Giulia was known as a friend to the troubled wife. The reason why she was a friend to the troubled wife, Giulia made a potion which was considered poisonous. And basically, Giulia would basically make this potion, which consisted of the three things that I listed: arsenic, lead, and belladonna. Now they're saying belladonna juice is something good for the health and wealth of people, but back then nobody knew how to properly use it. But they did know for a fact that if it was consumed, it was something that was deadly, along with arsenic and lead. Basically, Giulia, who is at this point, Giulia is like your best friend. She was best friends with the working class women and the lower class women because she felt that she needed to give these women another option. Giulia basically created this powder to make sure that these women who had all these problems, getting beat and not having love in their marriage and could not take it, she created this powder specifically for them because she watched her mother go through the same thing. And her mother poisoned her father, and that is the story of that. What she did was she got cool with a pastor of a church who had a brother who was an apothecary. And this apothecary brother, who they don't list, basically would give her arsenic in bulk. That was basically the supply man. And that would lead up to one of the craziest situations that happened back in the day. So the bulk of arsenic that she got from this apothecary, who was the brother of the pastor to the church, she would use that to make her own odorless, tasteless poison called Aqua Tofani. Every time I say that, I want to say I tried to record this episode 1,001 times. And every time I say Aqua Tofani, I have to whisper it because it sounds like a really super duper disgusting. It's like a weird ass commercial. It's weird, but it is what it is. Alright, so today we're going to talk about Aqua Tofani. It's located on your local shelves. Back then, if you can go to the market, you definitely would be able to find Aqua Tofani. It was made by a young lady named Giulia Tofani. Back then, there weren't any major things, but we're going to tell you what's going on with Miss Giulia. For someone whose crimes were so expensive and whose track record in dealing with death to so many was long, it was surprising that the historical record is silent about Miss Giulia Tofani. She was known as the most prolific serial killer ever, and she was a woman who sold poison and killed about 600 men. I say 600 plus because her track record of killing when a span of over 50 years. So let's get into Miss Giulia. Coming down, Giulia Tofani. Sounds really weird, but hey. Little is known about her childhood, but her upbringing and her youth was about much that we can really find on her life, or that I could really find on her life. Giulia was said to be exceptionally beautiful, and she was just like her mother, Tofani Armando. I'm probably saying it wrong, but I'm trying my hardest. Italian is not my thing, but I thought it was interesting, so I wanted to give it to you guys now. But there are no survival portraits of her or anything like that, but there's just mythical stories. So what is known of Tofani? She was basically born and she grew up in Sicily. Her mother was an apothecary who made and sold perfume and cosmetics and herbal medicines and other concoctions, which her mother was executed July the 12th of 1633. After she was convicted of murdering her husband, Francis, it was unknown whether her husband was poisoned, but odds are that he had been. Tofani took after her mother in more ways than one, including a mastery of apothecaries, in which she would exhibit an interesting interest since her early age. So she's kind of already been interested in mixing and making her own potions since she was a young person. Tofani is credited with having the invention of the infamous poison that bore her by the name Aqua Tofani. I've literally, every time I say Aqua Tofani, it is so funny. No, it's not funny. It was a poison. No, not good. All right. So let's talk about this Aqua Tofani. Now, Aqua Tofani was made out of 3 different ingredients, which was arsenic, lead, and belladonna berry juice. Now, these 3 things together were her odorless, tasteless poison, but they were used. 2 of them were used together for a facial powder. Back then, it was like, I want to lighten my skin. I need to use arsenic and lead. And the belladonna juice, they would drop like 1 or 2 drops in each eye to make your pupils super duper big, because that was considered very attractive and luminous to people. Now, if any of these things were consumed, of course, it was a death situation. But I mean, who knew? Oh, I know. Giulia. That's who knew. So either way, Giulia basically perfected this toxin and began to sell it discreetly under the covers of cosmetics. She basically sold it in a small vial, which was known as Man of Saint Nicholas of Baro. And basically, she wanted to make sure that this was a seamless situation where it was on the counter and nightstands and shelves of just women, period, because some women she felt like were in bad situations. Now, back in the day, it was said that women only had 3 options, which was be a widow, marry into a loveless, abusive relationship, or you would die from childbirth. So they really didn't have options back then. And of course, divorce definitely wasn't an option. So Giulia felt like she wanted to be the friend of the troubled wife. Because of this, she concocted the Aqua Tofani, and she made sure that everything was pre-planned step by step. What she did was she would go to her little selling stand at the market where she sold cosmetics, and some people would ask for Aqua Tofani. Now, Giulia was a young widow when she first began peddling her poison, and it was possible that she tested the perfect recipe for Aqua Tofani on her own husband. She did have a daughter, which is Sparella. That was her last name. Can't really say her first name. Don't judge me. This is Italy, okay? They had some very interesting names. Basically, Spella followed in her mother's footsteps and joined what became the family business of basically selling poison. Hey, you don't need a job. Come work for me. You're my child. You should. Basically, mother and daughter, they kept it low key for decades as they moved through Italy. First, it was in Palermo. I'm probably saying that wrong. Don't judge me. And then they eventually moved it to Naples. And eventually from Naples to Rome. So they kind of sort of moved around, but that is how they gained a lot of their clientele because of moving around so much. Most of Tofani's customers were women who were seeking widowhood, but not all. She also sold Aqua Tofani to men and women who saw that it wasn't no means to basically settle a dispute and eliminate businesses and romantic rivals, or paying those who had given them offenses. Most of all, she would just definitely give it to the wives, who turned to Tofania to help in murdering their husbands, so they could escape the marital abuse. Some were motivated by simple greed and wanted to come into the inheritance. Indeed, poison was used in Italy back then to speed up the inheritance, and basically Tofania, which nickname inherited poison. Now, like I said, the main ingredients for Tofania's poison, Aqua Tofani, also known as the belladonna, which is known as a deadly nightshade, combined with arsenic and lead. However, while the chef components are known, the manner in which they were blended has been lost in history. Like how much lead did she use, how much arsenic she used, and how much of the belladonna berry juice was used. That was what it was put into a journal that she kept, which was burned at the stake. Basically, what is known is that the final product was colorless, odorless, tasteless liquid, which almost impossible to detect when you add water or wine. Only a few drops were needed, broken into a few doses to do in a victim. Basically, Aqua Tofani was a slow acting, and it basically produced symptoms of a common cold the first 1 to 2 doses. Of course, the wife would be concerned, and she would put on this front as if, hey, my husband, something's wrong with him. The doctor would, of course, give them some type of medicine. Hey, take all of this. This will make you feel better. The wife would then give him soup and or wine or water, and it would be a second or third dose. By the 4th dose, there would be a death. Now, Giulia made sure that she covered her ass in all types of ways because she wanted to make sure that she was not getting caught. This is how her operation basically ran. Her operation ran like this. She would go to the market to sell her regular cosmetics and a Aqua Tofani. And basically what she would do is, let's just say your name is Giulia. Hi, Giulia. How are you? Hey, I'm looking for some Aqua Tofani. Giulia would basically be like, hey, who sent you over here to buy this? Oh, Terry, she sent it to me. She told me to come over here and get this. So she would go and check with Terry, and Terry would be like, yeah, she in an abusive situation. She got her ass beat 2 days ago, and she really needs to leave this guy. So once she would do that, she would give the woman the odorless, clearless vial, and she basically told her to be concerned. The first 2 sessions that you do, you only need 1 to 2 drops. The first 2 sessions, he will get some type of common cold. Call the doctor, seem very concerned, anxious, like you really care. The third vial, after the doctor gives the medicine, of course, he's going to take the medicine. The medicine is not going to make him better. By the third one, he's going to basically still have something of the common cold. The fourth dosage that you give him, he will be dead. Please make sure that you seem very concerned and let them know that you want an autopsy. Now, back then it wasn't called an autopsy, but I can't remember what they called it back then, just to make sure that, number 1, you don't look suspicious. Number 2, we want to make sure that you're the concerned wife and not looking for something in return. That's how she would coach them to make sure that they would do exactly what they were supposed to do, because that's how it's supposed to be. Basically, she also began to, on this vial of poison, she would put 1 to 2 drops a day, will make you feel luminous, or whatever the case may be, because what she did was she made sure that she covered her ass and that she did a background check on each and every woman who she sold the vial to, because she wanted to make sure there wasn't nobody gonna fuck up what was going on. Now, the downfall, and this is it's always 1 week, bitch, this fucking some shit up. It's always. So, this is how it happened. Basically, Tofani first, she was working solo and it came crashing down. However, it happened because her new client got cold feet. And this new lady who she sold the vial to reported that she put Aqua Tofani and she put it in her husband's suit. But then at the last minute, she changed her mind. She didn't want to kill her husband, even though he was beating the shit out of her. She changed her mind. She didn't want to kill her husband. So she stopped her husband from sipping the soup. And of course, the husband had suspicion of why do you want me to not eat this soup? And the husband of this weak link, the husband forced his repent wife to basically, he forced her down, beat the shit out of her, and told her, bitch, you need to tell me the truth of what the fuck is going on. The wife basically told him hey, I tried to poison you with this Aqua Tofani by this bitch named Giulia, who sold it to me. The husband takes her down to authority, and she told the authorities everything. So basically, the cat was out the bag. Okay, Tofani was going down. Now, because she had some loyal customers, Giulia was already tipped off that this bitch was a snitch. Okay, that told everything. So what ended up happening is Giulia had already fled. She fled to a church that she was cool with, because a long time ago, her mother would, like I said, her mother was an apothecary. So her mother was cool with the church, who she would get bulk of majority of her products from, the pastor's brother. She ended up hiding there for sanctuary for a long time. And what ended up happening is, basically, they found what church that she was basically hiding in for a couple of months or whatever. The rumor has spread it through Rome that she had poisoned the city's water. So a mob stormed the church and seized her. And they told the church people, if you don't give her up, we're gonna burn this fucking place down. And of course, the church was just no, you got to go, Giulia. We love you, but you got to go. So basically, she was handed over to the authorities and she was tortured. And she was done like this until she basically confessed to poisoning over 600 men between the years of 1633 and 1651. In July of 1659, Giulia and her daughter and 3 employees were executed in the Rome Square. Basically, then after they killed her, beheaded her, and made sure that she was dead and not alive, the church that she decided to hide in, they threw her corpse into the church that had offered her sanctuary, basically a place to hide as a you got me fucked up and don't do it again. Some of her clients were in the same predicament where they basically got beheaded, tortured, and things of that nature, and others served they got beheaded, stoned, others served time in prison, and others who were well connected, basically they got away. Now, it was said that the possible number of Tofani's victims were extravagant, and she was tortured during the investigation after all the people can say the darndest things under torture to make it stop. Indeed, considering that much evidence against her was considered from the confession was extracted under torture, it is possible that Giulia could have been completely innocent. She might as well have simply been a woman dabbing in cosmetics at the time when they were doing like a witch hunt in Europe. Women doing anything unusual or anything out of the ordinary were considered suspects of witch. So it was like a witch hunt. Now, the legacy of Giulia Tofani and her poison survived long after death. In 1791, the composer Mozart fell seriously ill. He became convinced that he had been poisoned. As he put it, quote, "I will not last much longer. I am sure I have been poisoned. I cannot rid myself of this idea. Someone has given me Aqua Tofani and calculated a time of death," end quote. Mozart was almost certainly mistaken, and historians believe he died from like a fever or like syphilis or like maybe uncooked pork or some weird ass shit. His paranoia was shared by many who took ill in those days, and it was basically poor medical diagnosis was put all on Tofani and her death. Now, this story was like, this is a little up and down. It makes me a little concerned about what's in my beauty products at this moment. Not that I use much, but Giulia was a interesting lady. This story time was not as widely and goodly constructed as the first episode, because the first episode actually had some type of background. Giulia doesn't really have much. They kind of burnt. When she burnt, everything else about her burnt. So, as always, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, you want to message me, you want to get at me, you want to tell me that, hey, you should do this person for the next episode, I don't mind. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. So guess what you should do? You should go to anchor.com and listen to the most recent and up-to-date episodes, as well as iHeartRadio. You can listen to me there. Go to my Instagram, Dirty Joe. So it's DURRTY. No, I'm sorry. Let me stop lying. It is. Go to my Instagram, DURTTY_JOE. I greatly appreciate you and love you with all my heart. And as always, it's going to be a beautiful day on the south side of GA. And I appreciate you. I got to go pay some bills though.